From a young age, my sister Emma and I did everything together. We were born only 18 months apart, and our lives seemed inseparable. Same schools, same classes, same dreams. Growing up in our modest Boston suburb, we'd spend hours sprawled across our shared bedroom floor, poring over medical journals we'd borrowed from the local library. Our walls were plastered with anatomical diagrams instead of boy band posters. While other kids in the neighborhood played tag in the streets, we took turns pretending to diagnose each other with increasingly dramatic ailments. "You have a severe case of appendicitis," Emma would declare solemnly, pressing her small fingers against my side. "We need to operate immediately." I'd clutch my stomach dramatically before breaking into giggles. "Well, you have pneumonia. I can hear it in your lungs." Our parents, Dad with his stern accountant's precision, and Mom with her perpetual worried frown, would shake their heads at our medical role-playing, but never discouraged our ambitions. "The Robinson girls are going to change medicine forever," Dad would tell visitors with a proud smile. I believed him completely. Why wouldn't I? We both wanted to become doctors, Emma dreaming of pediatric surgery while I was drawn to emergency medicine. We studied together late into the night, traded textbooks, and supported each other through every exam. When Emma struggled with chemistry in sophomore year, I stayed up explaining reactions until she got it. When I panicked before our SATs, she made flashcards and quizzed me until I felt confident. We were a team, or so I thought. But slowly, I started to notice the quiet favoritism. It appeared in small ways at first. Emma getting a new scientific calculator while I inherited her old one. Emma receiving private tutoring for AP biology while I was told to form a study group. Emma's academic achievements displayed prominently on the refrigerator, while mine were acknowledged with a quick "good job" before being tucked away in a drawer. While I had to take on part-time jobs at the local grocery store, and then the pharmacy, to help with our school materials, Emma never lifted a finger outside of her studies. When I asked about this disparity, Mom simply said, "Emma needs more time to focus. You're naturally more independent, Olivia." I accepted this explanation because it sounded like a compliment. Being independent seemed like a strength. I didn't realize then that it was the beginning of a pattern that would define our futures. The day we graduated high school was unseasonably warm for Massachusetts in June. The gymnasium was stifling, and we sat sweating in our matching blue caps and gowns. Emma was valedictorian. I was third in our class. Not bad for someone who worked 20 hours a week at CVS while maintaining a near-perfect GPA. After the ceremony, amidst the chaos of photos and congratulations, our parents pulled me aside to the empty band room. Dad's hand rested heavily on my shoulder, his wedding ring catching the fluorescent light. Mom stood slightly behind him, her lips pressed into a thin line. With calm, almost indifferent tones, they told me they would only be paying for Emma's college education. "We've looked at the numbers," Dad said, his accountant's voice detached and matter-of-fact. "We can afford one full ride, not two." I stood there stunned, wondering what I had done wrong. The room seemed to shrink around me, the shelves of tubas and drums closing in like witnesses to my humiliation. "But I've been accepted to UMass, medical's direct entry program," I stammered. "Just like Emma got into Boston University. We both—" "She earned it," Mom interrupted, her voice soft but firm. "She always tries harder." I couldn't argue. The words lodged in my throat like glass. I just nodded, swallowing the injustice like a bitter pill. Later that night, I heard them in the kitchen with Emma, discussing dorm options and meal plans, their voices animated with excitement for her future. So I worked. I took a full-time administrative job at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center during the day and studied during the night. I applied for grants, begged for scholarships, and even cleaned classrooms after lectures just to afford my tuition. I shared a cramped apartment in Roxbury with 3 other struggling students, taking the longest commute to school to save on rent. My fingers developed calluses from typing patient information for 8 hours, before switching to lecture notes. My eyes burned from staring at textbooks under the dim light of my bedroom, the only time I had to study. I survived on ramen and coffee, calculating each penny I spent against my next tuition payment. Emma would often send me pictures of her, relaxing at the campus cafe or buying new clothes with money our parents gave her. "Miss you, sis," her texts would say, attached to images of her weekend trips to Cape Cod with friends or her fully furnished studio apartment near Fenway. Meanwhile, I was barely sleeping 4 hours a night, but I endured. When I missed a family dinner because I was working a double shift and Mom texted, "Emma really misses you," I bit back the urge to respond with the truth. When Dad called to ask if I could help Emma move into her new apartment, using my one day off that month, I agreed without complaint. I told myself one day I would prove them wrong. Not with words or accusations, but with undeniable success that they couldn't ignore or dismiss. Each time I felt like giving up, when my eyes would close during lectures or my hands would shake from exhaustion, I'd remember their words. She earned it, and I would push myself harder, determined to earn something they could never take away: my independence, my education, my future. What they saw as my weakness became my greatest strength. They thought independence meant I needed less support. They were wrong. It meant I could survive without it. As the semesters rolled by, the gap between Emma and me widened like the Charles River in spring flood. She lived in her cozy studio, apartment near BU, with its bay windows and exposed brick walls that she'd proudly shown me through FaceTime. I stayed in a cramped third-floor walk-up in Dorchester, sharing a bathroom with 2 nursing students and a law school dropout who practiced violin at 3 a.m. Emma came home to Newton on weekends to cheerful Sunday dinners and doting parents. Dad would grill her favorite cedar plank salmon, while Mom baked those chocolate chip cookies that Emma loved since childhood. They'd sit around our maple dining table, the one passed down from Grandma Ruth, laughing about Emma's professors, and the cute guy from her anatomy lab. I'd get invited occasionally, usually as an afterthought. "Oh, Olivia, we're having dinner Sunday if you can make it," Mom would text on Saturday night, knowing full well I worked Sunday shifts at the hospital. When I did manage to attend, the conversation inevitably revolved around Emma's campus life, her internship opportunities, her study group friends. "Dr. Kensington says I have a real aptitude for diagnostics," Emma would announce, twirling pasta around her fork. "He's writing me a recommendation for that summer program at Johns Hopkins." "That's wonderful, honey," Mom would beam, reaching across to squeeze Emma's hand. "The Robinson medical legacy begins," Dad would add with a wink. I'd sit quietly, pushing food around my plate, wondering if they remembered there were supposed to be 2 doctors in this family legacy. Our conversations grew shorter, more strained. When we did speak, Emma's words were sprinkled with condescension, masked as concern. "You look tired, Liv," she'd say, examining me over coffee at the one cafe meetup I could afford that month. "Maybe this path isn't for everyone," she'd add, with a tilt of her head, her blonde hair falling perfectly across her shoulder. "I'm fine," I'd reply, hiding my chapped hands under the table. Hands rough from hospital disinfectant and night shifts entering patient data. "You know, there's no shame in taking a gap year," she continued, stirring her latte. "Or maybe looking into nursing instead. It's still medical, but less intense." I swallowed my retort with a sip of plain black coffee, the cheapest thing on the menu. What Emma didn't understand was that intensity wasn't my problem. Time was, money was, support was. When Emma got chosen for a prestigious research position with Dr. Harriet Wang, a leading cardiologist, our parents threw a small party. They invited the neighbors, put out a spread of catered food from that expensive place on Boylston Street, and toasted their brilliant daughter. Meanwhile, I had just been selected to assist on an emergency medicine research project studying trauma responses, an opportunity I'd fought for against dozens of other applicants, and our parents never asked how it was going. "How's your little hospital job?" Mom would ask occasionally, as if my work and studies were a hobby rather than my future career. Our parents never asked how I was managing to maintain my 3.8 GPA while working 40 hours a week. They only wanted to know how Emma was doing, how her grades were, what she needed next. When I mentioned my own achievements, passing pathophysiology with honors, being selected to present at a student research symposium, they smiled politely, then changed the subject. "That's nice, dear. Did you know Emma's been invited to shadow at Mass General next semester?" Their silence about my accomplishments hurt more than any insult could. It was as if I was fading before their eyes, becoming transparent while Emma grew more vibrant and solid. I made one last attempt at bridging this growing chasm during winter break of our junior year. I'd saved for months to buy thoughtful Christmas gifts, a leather-bound medical journal for Emma, inscribed with her name, a vintage first, edition of my father's favorite mystery novel, a delicate silver bracelet for my mother with birthstones for all four of us. They gave me a generic gift card to Target. That night, as snowflakes gathered on my windowsill, I cried for the last time over their indifference. I decided then that tears were a luxury I couldn't afford. I was on my own, and acknowledging that fact was strangely freeing. I refused to let their neglect define my worth. I buried myself in my work. I took on extra shifts at the hospital, which sometimes meant sleeping on the break room couch between my job and morning classes. I made friends with professors instead of partying with classmates. Dr. Levinson, my emergency medicine mentor, became the first person to truly see my potential. "You have exceptional instincts, Olivia," he told me after I correctly diagnosed a simulation patient with a rare complication, and a resilience that can't be taught. I earned his respect, and the respect of other faculty who noticed my dedication. Dr. Patel offered me a position in her research lab. Dr. Jimenez invited me to co-author a paper on emergency triage protocols. These small victories sustained me when family support didn't. My apartment roommates came and went, some graduating, others dropping out. But I remained, slowly transforming our shared living space into something that felt, if not like home, at least like mine. I hung my single plant, a stubborn pothos that refused to die despite my neglect, above my desk. I pinned my acceptance letters and small awards to a corkboard where I could see them each morning. I was determined to finish what I started, even if no one ever clapped for me at the finish line. I kept every acceptance letter, every recommendation, every award tucked safely in a folder, waiting for a day I could finally share them. Not for validation, but as evidence, proof that I had done this alone. The winter of our senior year brought record snowfall to Boston. As I trudged through drifts to reach the T-station for my morning commute, I received a text from Emma. "Got my residency interviews at 3 top hospitals. Mom and Dad are taking me shopping for interview suits this weekend. So nervous, but excited." I texted back congratulations while standing on the crowded train, my breath fogging in the unheated car. That same week, I'd received my own residency. Interview invitations. 5 of them, including one at the prestigious Brigham and Women's. I hadn't told anyone yet. There was no one who would understand what it meant to me. That evening, I received an unexpected email from Dr. Levinson. He'd recommended me for a special emergency medicine fellowship, one that only accepted 2 students nationwide each year. "Your journey hasn't been easy," he wrote, "but you've shown exceptional strength and aptitude. Whatever happens, I'm proud of what you've accomplished." I read those words again and again in my cold apartment, the heating fighting a losing battle against Boston's February chill. Someone was proud of me. Someone had noticed. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel something beyond determination and exhaustion. Pride. Not the showy, applauded kind that Emma received, but something quieter and more solid. I had built this future with my own hands, brick by brick, shift by shift, test by test. As spring approached and graduation loomed, I realized I had gained something my sister, for all her support and advantages, might never understand: the absolute certainty that I had earned every opportunity, every success, every step forward on my own terms. By the time we both approached our graduation dates, Emma's in May, mine in December due to my heavier work schedule, our family home in Newton was bustling with excitement. The living room had transformed into graduation central, with color swatches, invitation samples, and venue brochures scattered across every surface. One Sunday in March, I stopped by to pick up some winter clothes I'd stored in my old bedroom closet. The familiar scent of Mom's lavender candles greeted me as I stepped through the front door, along with voices from the kitchen. I followed the sound to find my parents and Emma huddled around the island counter, surrounded by glossy printouts. "The atrium at the Marriott has that fountain you like," Dad was saying, glasses perched on the end of his nose as he examined a brochure. "But the Commonwealth room at the Parker House has more historical charm. I think the Marriott would be better for photos," Emma replied, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. "Plus, they can accommodate our guest list better." Mom noticed me first. "Oh, Olivia, I didn't hear you come in." "Just grabbing some things," I said, lingering in the doorway. "What's all this?" "We're planning Emma's graduation dinner," Dad explained without looking up. 120 guests, so we need somewhere spacious." 120 guests, I tried to imagine who all these people were. Extended family we rarely saw, parents, colleagues, neighbors, Emma's friends and their parents, all gathering to celebrate her achievement. "That sounds nice," I managed, my voice steady despite the familiar ache spreading through my chest. Emma glanced up, her expression brightening. "You should help us choose, Liv. You've always had a good eye for these things." I shook my head. "I can't today. I have a shift at the hospital in an hour." "Always working," Mom sighed, her tone suggesting disappointment rather than admiration. "Will you at least take a look at the dress we got for Emma? It just came in yesterday." Before I could respond, she hurried to the dining room and returned with a garment bag, unzipping it with reverent care. Inside was a designer dress in pale blue silk, the price tag still dangling from one sleeve. Even from a distance, I could see it cost more than 2 months of my rent. "It's beautiful," I said honestly, because it was. Emma would look like a magazine cover in it, her blonde hair and blue eyes perfectly complemented by the color. "We've invited every distant relative." "We have," Dad added proudly. "Even Aunt Meredith is flying in from Seattle, and the Richardsons and the Coopers, and Dr. Feldman who delivered you girls." Emma walked around the kitchen island like a crowned queen, already practicing her gracious smile and elegant posture. Meanwhile, I stood quietly in the background, invisible in plain sight. I'd become so accustomed to this role that it barely stung anymore. Almost. As I climbed the stairs to my old bedroom, their voices faded behind me. The room had remained largely untouched since I'd moved out 3 years ago. My high school. Debate trophies still lined the shelf, my old medical textbooks stacked neatly on the desk. But there were subtle changes too. Mom had repurposed my dresser to store her seasonal clothes. Dad had moved his exercise equipment into the corner by the window. I gathered what I'd come for, winter sweaters and boots, and was about to leave when I noticed something on my old bulletin board. A family photo from my high school graduation. We stood in front of the house, all smiles, arms around each other. My acceptance letter to UMass Medical was in my hand. Emma held hers to BU. Mom and Dad flanked us, beaming with equal pride. Equal. It was the last time things had felt that way. With sudden clarity, I realized that in a few months, Emma would graduate and begin her residency. Our lives would drift further apart, the pattern of favoritism solidifying into permanence unless something changed. The thought pressed down on me like a physical weight. Back downstairs, they were debating flower arrangements. "I think we should go with the white, roses and baby's breath," Mom was saying. "Classic and elegant." I cleared my throat. "I'll be graduating in December," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "Just a few months after Emma." The three of them looked up, momentarily startled as if they'd forgotten I was there. A beat of silence followed. "That's nice," my mother finally said without looking up from her phone, where she was scrolling through florist websites. No party, no plans, not even a card. They were too preoccupied helping my sister print out photo collages and write her valedictorian speech. "I've been selected as one of the top 10 students in my program," I continued, something stubborn rising in me. "I'll be speaking at the ceremony." Dad nodded absently. "Good for you, kiddo." Emma, at least, seemed to register the significance. "That's really great, Liv," she said, her smile genuine if fleeting. Then, turning back to Mom, "Do you think we should have the string quartet? For the whole evening or just during dinner?" I stood there a moment longer, watching them. The familiar kitchen with its granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. The family photos on the refrigerator, mostly of Emma these days. The calendar on the wall with Emma's graduation, circled multiple times in red marker. I didn't need their celebration. That revelation came with surprising peace. I had something else in mind. That evening in my apartment, I emptied my backpack, onto my bed and pulled out a large manila envelope from beneath my mattress. I gathered my documents, printed my research publications, and wrote out every scholarship and grant I had earned. I added my residency acceptance letters, all 5 of them, including the one from Brigham and Women's Hospital, where I'd decided to go. I included the fellowship offer letter from Dr. Levinson, the one that only 2 students nationwide received. Then I wrote a letter. Not a bitter one, though I had every right to be bitter. Instead, I wrote about my journey, the early mornings, the late nights, the double shifts and study sessions. I wrote about cleaning examination rooms to afford textbooks, about sleeping on hospital couches between shifts, about professors who became mentors when family support wasn't available. I wrote it all out in calm, measured words. Not to hurt them, but to make visible what had been invisible. To give shape to the silence that had surrounded my achievements. When I finished, I placed everything in a clean professional folder, the kind doctors use for important patient files. I labeled it simply, Olivia Robinson, MD. I planned to attend Emma's graduation, not as a bystander but with something to say. Not out of spite or revenge, but because the truth deserved to be spoken, because I deserved to be seen. As Emma's graduation day approached, I watched from a distance as my family's excitement reached fever pitch. Emma was fitted for her cap and gown at a special appointment, with Mom taking dozens of photos. Dad took time off work to help address invitations and coordinate with the caterers. They commissioned a professional photographer to document the day. No one asked if I needed time off to attend. No one checked if I had appropriate clothes for the ceremony. It was assumed I would simply appear, a shadow in the background of their perfect family portrait. The night before the ceremony, I received a text from Emma. "Nervous about tomorrow. Wish me luck?" I replied, "You'll be amazing, always are." And she would be. Emma was brilliant, dedicated, and deserving of celebration. My issue had never been with her success. It was with the imbalance, the inequity, the invisibility I'd been assigned. I laid out my outfit for the next day, a simple but professional navy dress, the nicest thing I owned. Beside it, I placed the folder containing my truth. Tomorrow, after years of silence, I would finally speak. Boston University's Agganis Arena buzzed with anticipation on graduation day. Thousands of folding chairs filled the floor where basketball games were usually played, each seat soon to be occupied by a proud family member. The stage gleamed under professional lighting, adorned with potted plants and the university's blue and scarlet banners. I arrived early, clutching my folder in one hand and my car keys in the other. I'd taken the day off work, unpaid of course, and driven from my apartment in the pre-dawn hours to avoid traffic. Finding a spot in the crowded garage had cost me $35 I couldn't really spare. But today wasn't about money. It was about truth. As I joined the growing crowd entering the arena, I spotted my parents immediately. Dad wore his charcoal suit with the burgundy tie, his important occasion outfit that I'd only seen at weddings and funerals. Mom had gotten her hair done, the honey blonde highlights fresh and styled in loose waves. They stood near the front, consulting a program and pointing toward the stage where Emma would soon appear. I approached slowly, my heartbeat quickening with each step. Mom saw me first, her eyebrows lifting slightly in surprise. "Olivia there. You are? We were wondering if you'd make it." Her tone suggested they hadn't actually been wondering at all. "We saved you a seat, but it's a bit far back. We couldn't get 5 together." 5. I did the mental calculation. Mom, Dad, Aunt Meredith from Seattle, Uncle Robert and his wife. Not me. I was expected to find my own seat elsewhere. "That's fine," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll find somewhere." Dad checked, his watch barely glancing at me. "The ceremony starts in 20 minutes. We should get settled." "Your sister's so excited," Mom added, straightening Dad's tie. "She's been texting me from the graduate assembly area. She got a special honor cord for her academic excellence." I nodded, the folder heavy in my hands. "I'm not surprised. Emma's always been exceptional." This, at least, was sincere. My issue had never been with Emma's abilities or accomplishments. She deserved recognition. What I couldn't accept was the imbalance, the erasure of my own journey. The auditorium was decorated with golden banners and white roses, Emma's favorite flower. Programs featured her photograph among other top graduates. As family members settled into their seats, I found a spot near the back, separate from my parents who sat proudly in the 5th row, center section. Close enough to see everything far, enough to observe unnoticed. The ceremony began with speeches from university officials. The dean spoke about excellence, perseverance, and future contributions to society. If only he knew, I thought, how different the paths to this day had been for some of us. Then came the graduates, filing into pomp and circumstance in their blue gowns and mortarboards. I scanned the procession until I spotted Emma, her posture perfect, her smile radiant even from a distance. 3 honor cords draped her shoulders. She deserved them all. My parents sat in the front rows with beaming faces, clapping eagerly as the ceremony progressed. When Emma's name was finally called, they rose to their feet. Dad whistled between his teeth, a sound I'd never heard him make before. Mom waved frantically as if Emma might miss seeing them among thousands. "Emma Victoria Robinson, summa cum laude," the announcer called. She walked across the stage to a wave of applause. Cameras flashed. Dad recorded the entire walk on his phone. Emma accepted her diploma with grace, posing for the official photograph before moving her tassel from right to left. From my seat in the back, I felt a complex tangle of emotions. Pride in my sister's achievement, bitterness at the disparity in support, determination about what I needed to do next. After the ceremony, graduates and families spilled onto the plaza outside. I stood silently by a large concrete planter, watching as my family gathered around Emma. Hugs were exchanged. Speeches were made about how proud they were of her. Aunt Meredith dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Uncle Robert shook Emma's hand, with exaggerated formality before pulling her into a bear hug. I was dressed in a simple navy dress, not designer like the pale blue silk Emma now wore under her open graduation gown, holding a small folder close to my chest. No one noticed me, not even my sister, who walked past me to take pictures with friends. That invisibility burned, but it also steeled my resolve. The reception was held at the Marriott. The fountain venue had won out after all. The hotel had transformed its ballroom into a celebration space with white tablecloths, floral centerpieces, and a string quartet playing softly in the corner. Place cards guided guests to assigned tables. I found mine at the far edge of the room, seated with distant cousins I barely recognized. My parents and Emma occupied the center table with close family and Emma's academic advisors. The setting couldn't have been a more perfect metaphor for our family dynamic. Emma at the center, me at the periphery. I sipped water and picked at my salmon as conversations flowed around me. The cousins asked polite questions about my own studies, but their interest faded quickly when someone announced it was time for toasts. Dad stood first, tapping his glass with a knife. The room quieted. He cleared his throat, emotion already thickening his voice. "Today," he began, "is the culmination of years of hard work and dedication. When Emma told us at age 7 that she wanted to be a doctor, we knew she had the intelligence and drive to make it happen. We've watched her pour her heart and soul into her studies, sacrificing social events and sleep to achieve her dream." Mom nodded vigorously beside him, tears glistening in her eyes. "No challenge was too great for our Emma," Dad continued. "She tackled every obstacle with determination and grace. Her mother and I couldn't be prouder of the physician and person she's become." He raised his glass higher. "To Emma, the first Dr. Robinson in our family, may your career be as brilliant as your mind." "To Emma," echoed around the room. "The first Dr. Robinson." I felt something crack inside me. Not my heart, which had developed calluses over the years, but the dam holding back my truth. As the applause faded and guests lifted their glasses, I stood. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. Heads turned. My father's smile faltered. I moved toward the center of the room, my folder clutched tight against my chest. My voice shook, but I didn't waver. "I'd like to say something too," I said, loud enough to carry across the suddenly quiet room. Mom's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. This wasn't part of the program. This wasn't planned. This wasn't about Emma. I took a deep breath and stepped into the light. All eyes turned to me. The string quartet's music faltered, then stopped entirely. Emma's smile froze on her face. My mother half rose from her seat, clearly prepared to intercept me. But my father placed a restraining hand on her arm. Perhaps he thought I would simply offer a brief, polite congratulations and sit down again. He was wrong. I stood in the center of the room, the weight of over 100 stares pressing against me. The folder felt suddenly heavy in my hands. For a brief, terrifying moment, I considered retreating, finding my seat at the edge of the celebration, and continuing my role as the family's shadow. But then I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall behind the head table. I barely recognized myself. When had my shoulders begun curving inward? When had I started making myself smaller to accommodate their neglect? I straightened my spine and opened the folder. "I want to congratulate Emma first," I began, my voice steadier than expected. "Because she absolutely deserves this celebration." Emma's posture relaxed slightly, and a few guests nodded in approval. "My sister has always been brilliant," I continued. "From the time we were children sharing a bedroom in Newton, dreaming about becoming doctors together, Emma has had a remarkable mind and dedication to medicine." I met Emma's eyes across the room. Something passed between us. Recognition, perhaps. A shared memory of those early days when we were teammates rather than competitors. What many of you don't know, I said, turning slightly to address the wider room, is that today we're celebrating only half of the story. I removed the first document from my folder, my acceptance letter to UMass Medical School. Emma and I both were accepted to medical school in the same year. We both dreamed of becoming doctors since we were old enough to pronounce stethoscope. The difference was that while Emma received full financial support from our parents, I was told they could only afford to help one of us. The room grew quiet. A woman I didn't recognize at table 8 covered her mouth with her hand. Aunt Meredith shifted uncomfortably in her seat. So I worked, I continued, my voice gaining strength. I took 2 jobs during the day and studied during the night. I applied for grants, begged for scholarships, and even cleaned classrooms after lectures just to afford my tuition. I pulled out pay stubs, scholarship letters, financial aid documents, evidence of the path I'd been forced to walk alone. While Emma lived on campus with all expenses covered, I stayed in a cramped apartment an hour away from school, often skipping meals to save money for textbooks. My mother's hand trembled on her wine glass. My father blinked rapidly, his smile completely gone now. Guests looked around uncomfortably, unsure whether to watch this unfolding scene or pretend to be fascinated by their dessert plates. I'm not sharing this to diminish Emma's accomplishments, I clarified, glancing again at my sister who stood frozen, eyes wide with disbelief. She worked incredibly hard and deserves every honor she's received. I pulled out my research publications, the fellowship award letter, the recommendation from Dr. Levinson, praising my exceptional resilience and clinical instincts. What I want to make visible today is the journey that's been invisible. The sacrifices that went unnoticed, the achievements that were never celebrated. I placed the fellowship letter on the table in front of my parents. This fellowship is awarded to only 2 medical students nationwide each year. I received it last month. Then came my residency acceptance letter. I've been accepted to the Emergency Medicine Residency Program at Brigham and Women's Hospital. It's consistently ranked among the top 5 in the country. Next, my academic transcript showing my 3.9 GPA. I maintained this while working 40 hours a week at Beth Israel. Each document told part of the story. The research grants I earned, the patient care awards, the leadership positions, the history of my medical education, written in official letterhead and institutional seals. You always said Emma deserved your support because she worked harder, I said, looking directly at my father for the first time. But you never even looked at what I was doing. The room grew so quiet I could hear the ice melting in water glasses. My mother's face had drained of color. My father sat rigidly, his eyes fixed on the documents before him as if they were written in a language he couldn't understand. I finished, my words calmly, then placed the folder on the table in front of my parents. I didn't come here to ruin Emma's celebration, I said, my voice softer now. I came because I wanted you to know that in December, there will be a second Dr. Robinson graduating. I wanted you to see what you've missed. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply let the truth speak for itself. Every ignored effort, every slight, every lonely night I spent fighting for what was handed to Emma, it was all there, in that folder. They didn't say anything. They couldn't. My father's face had gone pale. His earlier pride curdled into something I couldn't name. Shame, perhaps, or confusion. My mother stared at the papers as if seeing me for the first time. Aunt Meredith broke the silence. I had no idea, Olivia, she said, her voice carrying in the quiet room. You've accomplished so much on your own. Several other relatives murmured in agreement. Uncle Robert looked distinctly uncomfortable, swirling the ice in his scotch. Emma hadn't moved or spoken. She stood beside the head table, one hand gripping the back of her chair, her expression unreadable. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Not anger or embarrassment, but a dawning recognition. I hadn't planned what would happen after my speech, Part of me had imagined dramatic apologies, perhaps tears and reconciliation. The reality was more subdued, but somehow more powerful. The truth had been spoken aloud after years of silence, and its weight settled over the room like a physical presence. I turned around and left the room, each step lighter than the last. I had carried that silence for so long, it felt liberating to let it go. In Bursa, the hotel lobby. I paused near a large arrangement of white roses. My hands were steady now, no longer clutching a folder of evidence. I felt oddly empty, but not in a hollow way. More like a vessel that had been filled with something toxic and was now clean. The elevator doors opened, and several guests from the reception emerged, giving me curious glances as they passed. I recognized Mrs. Henderson, our old neighbor from Newton, among them. "Olivia," she said, touching my arm gently. "I had no idea what you've been through. Your parents always talked about Emma's accomplishments, but never mentioned your struggles or successes." I nodded, unsurprised. "That's why I needed to speak today." "Well, I think you're remarkable," she said firmly, "and I'll be attending your graduation in December." Before I could respond, the lobby doors opened again. My father stood there, looking somehow smaller than he had an hour ago. Behind him, my mother hovered uncertainly, clutching her purse with both hands. "Olivia," he said, his voice rough. "We need to talk." I considered refusing, walking out to my car and driving back to my apartment in Dorchester. I had said what needed saying. The rest was up to them. But something in his expression, a vulnerability I'd never seen before, made me nod. "Yes," I agreed. "We do." The hotel's garden terrace offered privacy and a respite from the charged atmosphere of the reception. Early summer in Boston painted the sky a perfect blue, making the contrast with our family's stormy mood even more pronounced. My father chose a table in the corner, away from the few other guests enjoying the afternoon sunshine. We sat in awkward silence for several moments. My mother fidgeted with her napkin, folding and unfolding it with trembling fingers. My father stared at his hands, wedding ring glinting in the sunlight. I waited, determined that they would speak first. They owed me that much. "Why didn't you tell us?" my father finally asked, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. The question was so unexpected, so divorced from reality, that I almost laughed. "Tell you? I tried. For years I tried." My mother shook her head. "You never said you were struggling so much, Olivia." "I didn't have to say it," I replied, keeping my voice level. "You should have seen it. When I worked double shifts and missed family dinners. When I wore the same 3 outfits for years while Emma got new clothes every season. When I graduated with honors and you barely acknowledged it." My father cleared his throat. "We always thought you were doing fine. You seemed so capable." "Capable doesn't mean I didn't need support," I said. "It doesn't mean I didn't want my parents to be proud of me too." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We were proud of you." "No," I corrected gently. "You were relieved that I wasn't a problem. That's different from pride." They didn't argue the point. The truth of it hung between us, impossible to deny, after years of evidence. "We made a mistake," my father said finally, his accountant's precision failing him as he searched for adequate words. "A terrible mistake." It was the closest thing to an apology I was likely to get. Not, "I'm sorry we hurt you," but "we made a mistake." As if the years of neglect were a simple accounting error that could be fixed with an adjustment entry. "Yes," I agreed. "You did." We talked for nearly an hour on that terrace. I answered their questions about my jobs, my apartment, my studies. I told them about professors who had become mentors, colleagues who had become friends. I described my research and the patients who had touched my life. With each story, their expressions shifted from shock to something like wonder, as if discovering a person they'd never truly seen before. They didn't directly apologize, but they started calling more after that day. They asked questions, wanted to visit, offered to help with my future plans. At first, I was wary, expecting their interest to fade quickly. But it didn't. My father sent a check that would have covered 3 months of my rent. I returned it with a note. I don't need your money now. I needed your support then. He didn't try to send money again, but he did start sending articles about emergency medicine that he thought might interest me. A different kind of currency, but one I was willing to accept. 3 days after the graduation ceremony, my phone buzzed with a text message from Emma. I hesitated before opening it, unsure what to expect. Anger? Defensiveness? Resentment that I'd shifted the spotlight on her big day? Can we meet? Just us. Please. We arranged to meet at a small cafe halfway between her new apartment in Brookline and mine in Dorchester. When I arrived, Emma was already there, 2 coffee cups on the table before her. She looked different somehow, less polished, more real. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans instead of her usual carefully coordinated outfit. "I ordered your usual," she said, pushing a black coffee toward me. "At least, what used to be your usual. I realized I don't actually know what you drink anymore." "Black coffee is still fine," I assured her, sliding into the seat across from her. "Some things haven't changed." She nodded, turning her own cup in her hands. "But many things have. Or maybe they were always different, and I just didn't see it." I sipped my coffee, waiting. "I'm sorry," she said finally, looking directly at me. I had no idea how unequal things were between us. "You weren't supposed to," I replied. "It wasn't your fault." "But I should have noticed," she insisted. "All those times I complained about course loads while you were working double shifts. All those times I texted you pictures of new clothes Mom and Dad bought me while you were stretching every dollar." I shrugged. "You were living your life. I was living mine." "That's just it," Emma said, leaning forward. "Our lives were supposed to be parallel paths, remember? The Robinson sisters becoming doctors together. Somewhere along the way, I got so caught up in my own journey that I forgot. We were supposed to be a team." We spoke for hours, and for the first time in years, we didn't compete. We connected. Emma admitted she had often felt crushing pressure to be perfect, to justify our parents' investment in her future. She confessed she'd sometimes envied my independence, my ability to navigate the world without constantly seeking approval. "You've built something real," she told me. "Something that's entirely yours. I admire that more than you know." It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. By the time we left the cafe, something had shifted between us. Not a complete healing, but a beginning. A recognition of each other as adults with separate journeys, not as rivals in an unspoken competition. Over the following months, Emma and I established a new ritual. Sunday morning coffee, just the 2 of us. Sometimes we talked about medicine, comparing notes on our training. Other times we reminisced about childhood or discussed books we'd read. Occasionally, we simply sat in comfortable silence, enjoying the newfound peace between us. My parents' transformation was less dramatic but still meaningful. They began including me in family gatherings without the awkward afterthought quality of previous invitations. My mother called regularly, asking questions about my residency. And actually, listening to the answers. My father sent clippings from medical journals with notes scrawled in the margins. "Thought of you when I read this." When December arrived, bringing my own graduation ceremony, I didn't expect much. I'd invited my family out of courtesy, rather than hope, prepared to celebrate my achievement alone if necessary. But they surprised me. All of them. My parents, Emma, even Aunt Meredith from Seattle, sat in the audience as I crossed the stage to receive my diploma. They weren't in the front row, and there was no elaborate reception afterward, but they were present. They clapped. They took photos. They hugged me and said they were proud. It wasn't perfect. Years of neglect can't be erased by a few months of effort. But it was a beginning. I graduated with honors and was offered a position in a competitive emergency medicine program at Brigham and Women's. On my first day as Dr. Olivia Robinson, I stood before the hospital's impressive facade, white coat, crisp against the January chill. A text message buzzed on my phone. Emma wishing me luck, with a picture of a coffee cup and a promise to hear all about it on Sunday. As I walked through those doors, I didn't care how many people had clapped at my graduation or how elaborate the celebration had been. I knew what it had taken to get there. Every shift, every sacrifice, every moment of determination when giving up would have been easier. That knowledge was enough. That knowledge was everything. The healing with my family continues. Sometimes progressing, sometimes regressing, always complicated. Some wounds are too deep to disappear entirely. But the silence has been broken, the invisible made visible. I no longer shrink myself to fit their expectations or seek validation they may never fully provide. Instead, I've redefined my worth on my own terms. I've built a life and career with my own hands, brick by brick, shift by shift. Whatever happens, with my family, that achievement belongs to me, and no one can take it away. Sometimes patients ask if I come from a medical family. Yes, I tell them. There are 2 Dr. Robinsons. And in that simple answer lies a victory greater than any revenge I could have imagined. The victory of becoming exactly who I was meant to be, not despite the obstacles, but because I had the strength to overcome them.